sponsors will straight up ask them, can you give me an example of how you're promoting your current sponsors on social media? And usually it's just crickets.
Hey guys, I'm Juliana, your automotive woman. Welcome to this episode of Cars Without Sausage. This week I chat with Tony Scott, owner of Drive Motorsports International, a boutique agency focused on motorsport marketing and sponsorship. Tony is incredibly passionate about sponsorship and has found success over the last 12 years throughout motocross, IndyCar, and NASCAR, just to name a few, by being honest, using integrity, and putting in the hours that are required. If you have a young driver in your household who's currently looking to move up the racing ladder and who needs a sponsorship, this is the podcast for you, as Tony and I lay out the basics of what needs to be done to be successful. I hope you enjoy this podcast, and thank you for watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So Tony, what I really appreciate about you is there's no bullshit when you're speaking about motorsport sponsorship or motorsport marketing in general, and call that experience, call that confidence. But before we get into the absolute basics that drivers need to know about motorsport sponsorship and motorsport marketing, where does your passion for motorsports come from, and how did you develop Drive Motorsports International?
Yeah, thank you. My passion started really young. I grew up on, my family had a farm, and so there was tractors around, there was trucks, there was snowmobiles, dirt bikes, four-wheelers, and I was always into tools. I was always into trying to fix some things, or my grandpa had a farm equipment that always needed repairs. So me and my brother and my dad were always working on things and tinkering with things. And my cousin was into motocross. And so he was an older, he's probably 7 years older. And when I was little, of course, I wanted to be into motocross and I wanted a dirt bike. So I became really obsessed with dirt bikes, and I still am today. And I still ride every week. I'm very passionate about it. And that kind of led me down that path of the automotive world. I was always into hot rods. I was always into race cars. My dad was into classic cars. So we always had all this, car stuff around, and I was kind of always immersed into it. And even my first car was a 1985 Monte Carlo SS. And it was bone stock when we bought it. And then maybe a month or two into owning it, I was already trying to soup it up and put big tires on the back and make it louder and make it faster and, annoy all of the neighbors and all of that stuff. So it just was started when I was really, really little, and ended up trying to pursue a passion in that, and ended up going to aviation school. And I was a commercial helicopter pilot for several years before venturing off, I guess, into the marketing side of the industry and working for, this was in the mid 2000s, working for NASCAR teams and then working for other agencies before I thought I was smart enough to start my own agency in 2009, and had a couple clients that wanted to go with me from another place. And that's kind of how we got it started. And it was very small. It still is small. We're still a small business. I think a lot of people think that we're really big, but we're small. We're very, very boutique. We like it like that. It allows us to be very flexible. But when we started, it was just kind of purely on activation. It was purely measurement. We were coming out of the economy downturn of 2009, 2008. And a lot of sponsorships, I think, were trying to find a way to analyze return on their investment and understand, is this money going, to the right places to help us grow our business? Is it producing results as far as revenue or our goals? Is it helping us achieve our goals? Mm-hmm. And I think that was really trendy at that time. So we started to go in that direction. And then, working in the industry a little bit, we would get inquiries, and we would obviously work with racing teams and drivers. And then we ended up working with a team and selling them a sponsorship. And then someone else asked us to sell them a sponsorship, and then so forth and so forth. But we also work with racing teams, racing drivers, sometimes tracks and facilities as well. So it seems like we get inquiries regularly about people looking for us to sell them sponsorships. And while we do other services, it seems like people are coming to us because we sell sponsorships, or it's something that we have done. It is very difficult, but it seems like we get inquiries almost every week from, it seems like amateur. We do get professionals that reach out to us as well. We do have some affiliations with some big professional teams, but on the property side of things, properties, meaning teams, drivers, tracks, or series, seems like it's more on the amateur side. And at times, even recently, we've been getting inquiries from parents of teenagers, and even as young as 14. We have a 14-year-old phenom that we're working with right now, and he's doing really great. But that's pretty young, as far as sponsorship goes. So it's been a wild ride, but it's interesting, as you know from your experience as well. It has its peaks and valleys. There's good days and there's bad days. I think there's a lot of misconceptions with the industry, and I think that there's a lot of misunderstandings as far as just like the basics of what's required for a sponsorship. We get a lot of people that, or parents, I would say too, that they just kind of expect sponsorship, or they think it's kind of a right that, oh, my kid is racing at this amateur level, and why can't he get sponsorship? And it's, there's a fundamental misunderstanding, I think, as far as realistic expectations and where these drivers are in the marketplace as a whole, and how sponsorships work, or how a business would consider a sponsorship. So happy to be on this podcast with you and kind of answer some of these questions about sponsorships and kind of sponsorship 101. Mm-hmm. Hopefully I don't go down too many rabbit holes, because I'm very passionate about this, and just like you, I could probably go on for a couple hours. So I'm going to lean on you to kind of keep me on track too. But
yeah, hopefully. So you said a lot of things well there. So first of all, my passion, just like yours, began very young. I grew up on a go-kart track, Italian family, 2 older brothers. So essentially whatever they did, I did. I just decided to stick with it and become a professional and seek sponsors for that next step. And it was much different then than it is now. And we will unpack some of those differences between then and now. But is there one particular sponsorship project that you're most proud of throughout the years? Because now it's over 12 years later. So you've been through a lot of ups and downs.
I think that one of the ones that stands out for me the most is a sponsorship we did with a driver. His name is Jake Tim. He races dirt late models and modifieds in World of Outlaws and USMTS and a couple other series. And he came to us it was maybe 2 years ago, and was looking for sponsorships. And he wasn't really doing a lot with his brand as far as social media or website, or he didn't have any marketing materials. And they ended up hiring us to do all of our one of our bigger services for them, and we took over all the sponsorship sales. And for us, when we are working with the clients, we kind of make them do their own social media. We guide them, but a lot of the drivers are reluctant to kind of do it, or they're nervous, or they're not really understanding. So we guided him and trained him on how, best practices of what to do, and, find his own way to do it. And we ended up brokering a sponsorship with this company called Gorilla Mill, which is, they make carbide cutting bits and end mill bits for fabrications and CNC machines. And Jake's family owns a CNC machining company, and they were already buying carbide cutting bits as far as their business model goes. So we ended up putting that deal together, and he, did his social media and continues to do it, and found a funny way to do it, a fun way to do it, and incorporate his sponsors. And he's doing really well now. And now the sponsor is, coming to him with, more money every year. We're not having to go to them or go, and say, okay, well, what about, this, or how do we re-up the sponsorship? They're now coming to him, and, they're really happy with his social media. He's doing a really good job. He's rocking and rolling. He's winning. I think he just won recently too. So that's one that I think is that I'm most proud of, because he was very reluctant to do the social media, to kind of take that seriously. And it's such a important thing these days with brands. Not every brand, but it is unfortunately a trend that these sponsors want to see some content of some degree, or their brands or their services incorporated into the drivers or the team's social media content and their lifestyle. And so that's something that was that always stands out for me. I just love working with him. I talk to him still often. We're friendly, and I just used him as a referral just not that long ago, which is rare for someone to ask us a referral, but it's just one that stands out for me, as one that I'm more proud of. It wasn't the biggest deal, but it wasn't small, but I think it was just the way that it happened for him. And now that they're coming to him and he has a great relationship with them, and he's kind of now taken that over, and, they're now, I don't want to say throwing more money at him, but that's how happy that they are with the results and what he's doing with them, and how he's trying to help them make more money, and how he's marketing them through social media and through the racing assets, the race car, and all of that stuff. So he's doing a really great job. So that's my favorite.
Okay, so you touched on so much there. It is now social media. It's having your branding in line. It's return on investment. When I was coming through the motorsport ladder system, websites were just, coming to market. I had a hero card. It was really small and really basic, and that's what I handed out to fans. And now those same hero cards are larger, and we're seeing them used as not just something to hand out to fans or essentially consumers that are trackside, but turning them into coupons. Right?
Yeah.
Here's my hero card. Take advantage of my coupon that my sponsor is giving away. So there's a lot to unpack there, because you mentioned the social media and you mentioned business to business, right? So your previous client saw an opportunity there, whereas they were business owners and they used a particular company or a product, and they were able to bring them together to increase value for both parties, right? The driver gets to go racing, gets some funding, and the product on the other side is seeing a return on their investment, seeing their business grow as well. So what I want to do is I want to speak about an example. So if I was a parent, calling you up or sending you an email, and I'm sure you receive a lot, just like I still do.
Yeah.
But I'm a 13 to 14-year-old kid looking now to progress up the motorsport ladder, getting into sports car or, Formula 1600, even Formula 2000, and really start that ladder system, and even motocross, right? These are the basics that people need to know. So let's shine a light on those basics, but also make it easier for parents to understand that it doesn't matter if your kid's the next Michael Schumacher. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You need to have the basic tools about what you're actually offering to sponsors. So again, I put it out there. I'm sending you an email. I'm a parent to a 13, 14-year-old kid that's making the step up. And what is motorsport sponsorship, and what are those basics that I need to know about?
Yeah, great question. We do get inquiries from teenagers and parents alike. I think it's interesting now because there's a lot of there's a push, I think, within the industry for new faces, new young, talent, and all of that stuff. So now there's this need for sponsorship, right? Understanding, the basics, and understanding the marketplace as a whole, and how, I guess, interested companies are in sponsorships. I think that's at the first thing that I try to explain is these companies are not Google searching, where to do race car sponsorships. A lot of times you're going to have to reach out to them. And so when you reach out to them, how are you reaching out to them? Are you calling them? Are you sending them an email? Are you sending them a DM on social media? And then let's say that they get it. Then they're gonna research you. They're gonna go and they'll look at your social media. They're gonna pull up your website if you have one. They're gonna kind of judge you. and they're going to look for those basics. And if it's a savvy marketer or a savvy business person and they've grown a brand, or their job is to market, for their job, they're going to compare that. And if you can't market yourself, how are you going to market a sponsor? So it's that kind of that basic of, websites. You mentioned about websites. We pitch websites, and we do websites internally here. It's not the end all be all, but what we like about it is they allow the drivers to have a central hub for their schedule, for more information that we can't have in, a hero card, or sometimes even social media, or even in the marketing pitch decks that we use. So the website, and having a properly organized websites that's mobile friendly. Believe it or not, I mentioned mobile friendly. There are websites, driver websites, that are still, desktop only, and anyone, so with some marketing experience should know that, people are pulling up websites on their phones. People are ordering products on their phones these days. So even things like that, these are small little things that the sponsor will pick out. And you don't want to give the sponsor really any reason to kind of say no. You want to have, anything that you can control, you want to have that as perfected as possible and as professional as possible. And kind of, it is marketing. You want to, make it larger than life, so to speak, without lying or, misrepresenting yourselves. But you do have to do a good job as far as promoting yourself, be a self-promoter. But then there's the balance of social media. A young kid, 13, 14, we have a 16-year-old. So, we are kind of allowing him on social media and stuff like that. But school is obviously of the most importance. And so, there's a lot of questionable things and interesting things on social medias that can distract and, from a young teenager mind. So, while from a marketing agency side, we try to talk to parents and these young kids about the importance of social media, and looking at some of these other athletes out there who have a lot of followers and sponsors, and kind of try to motivate them to start to do content on social media, and maybe talk on, selfie style kind of, or go live and talk people through their weekend when they're at the racetracks, and get people to know them and all of that stuff. That's important. We have sponsors. When we sell sponsors, we just had this recently, a driver, a 23-year-old driver who's not doing anything on social media, and we try to get him to, but we pitched it to a major national oil brand, and they said, can you send me his social media stats? Can you send me what kind of content he's producing on social media? And so I don't have that with this driver. And then you find out that they went and did this bigger deal with someone else who is doing that kind of thing. So these days, the trend is social media or YouTube. And I would say it's not necessarily a requirement, but it's a point of differentiation, really, is what you want to find. What separates your kid or you from the rest of the 20 cars and drivers that are out there on the racetrack? Is it your ability to win? Can you just win all the time? Is it your social media content? Do you have a business to business opportunity that you can leverage? Are you an athlete in some other sport that you can cross over or introduce an audience from one sport to another sport? Or are you an average racer that isn't doing anything on social media, and then you're complaining about sponsorship, And having a realistic understanding of where you or your child stands in the marketplace is really important. We get inquiries from parents, and they almost, think it's a right for their kid to have sponsorship. And it's a privilege, and you got to kind of do the right thing. And, you got to have your website as dialed in as possible. I think it's really, impossible to have perfect websites. No one has a perfect website. You got to have a proper marketing kit. Doesn't have to be perfect, no, but it can't just be a Word document with a bunch of words. It has to have cool graphics, and it has to have nice data. It's extremely competitive on the sponsorship side. If people think that it's competitive on the racetrack, it's 10 times more competitive with sponsorships. And, going to these companies and introducing yourself as a young, race car driver, or if you're a parent and you're introducing your child for a potential sponsorship, you got to have an understanding of, how these businesses would consider a sponsorship and how to kind of handle those conversations. And so, it's, we call it the wild, wild west, this industry. It is very challenging, but so you got to have all of your ducks in a row as far as these basics, and you got to have something that's different. You don't have to, but it really will help, and sometimes when we're selling sponsorships for a client, sometimes the sponsor, they're just interested in racing, or sometimes they don't really care that much about social media. Sometimes we do find that. And they're just, they like the personality, or they like the driver's story, or there's something interesting about that driver that they like, or they, understand the business model that we are trying to put together for them to help them grow their business or brand through a race car sponsorship. It's not just a logo on a race car. That's, part of it still, but there's so many other pieces that go into it. And every sponsor, every company is different. What one company wants or thinks they want for a return on investment is going to be different. If you went to Coke and Pepsi, both colas, both sodas, they might have different answers as far as their goals or what they would, consider return on investment. For example, the sponsorship that I mentioned earlier with Gorilla Mill, when we first were into that sponsorship and negotiating, and I remember the first year we were going in for a renewal for the second year, and the president, he would say, Tony, I don't care about your measurement metrics that you're going to send to me. I don't care about the marketing data. I care about sales. I care about how much money it's going to make us. And so those are difficult sponsors to deal with. And this is everyday normal stuff for us. Mm-hmm. So, understanding the value, understanding the cost to value, differences as far as how much it costs to compete versus the value that you're actually providing, because everyone will go to sponsors and try to sell their sponsorships for what it costs them to incur to compete, right? But they don't necessarily understand what the value of the sponsorship is. Sometimes we will do valuations. We did a valuation maybe a year ago for an IMSA team in the Michelin Pilot Challenge Series. Not going to mention the team, but the whole year, their value was $77,000 of marketing value. They weren't doing anything on social media. They were not, they were doing well as far as competing, but as far as the value that team or those logos are showing on the car, it's just not enough. And then when you look at how much it cost them to actually race, it's 10 times that probably. So, you got to have an understanding and measurement metrics. It's not just something that, motorsports marketing experts know. Like, this is, marketing, 101 that you could learn in, from an associate's degree, and it's just the facts. It's just the world that we live in. So really understanding all of these things and what could I do to increase the value for my sponsorship? What could I do to separate myself from everyone else? Those are important things.
Yeah. And I don't think parents think like that. Parents are kids. Instead, they're like, hey, I'm the best. I'm always winning. Sponsor me. Again, I take myself for an example. I wasn't just winning. I was kicking ass on every level, whether it's regional, national, worlds, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, how am I different? And what made me different is, my parents had a go-kart track. Still had that go-kart track. They had racing shops. They were doing trackside sales. So it was easy for companies like Arai to come to me, or even Fila was one of my first sponsors, Vega Tires, and was like, hey, we'll actually sponsor Juliana because yes, we get marketing value. She's seen, she's a female, she's kicking ass, but we're also selling cars trackside out of the trailer or at the service shop. We had 4 shops at one point, 2 in the US, and essentially 2 in Canada, because we had one at the go-kart track and then we had an office just outside of Toronto. So people back then were already looking at, like, what can you do for me? So let's just pump the brakes for a second and let's go back to everything you said, because I want to be clear. It doesn't matter how good your son or daughter is. It's about that return on investment. So take your ego out of it, right? And differentiate yourself. So I'm going to have a website who says who I am, where I race, and maybe updated news. Press releases are still important. You need hero cards. So people at a racetrack can take something away and be like, I met this person. I had their autograph when they were first getting started. I know this person. I'm going to become a fan. And then the biggest one you're speaking about, and of course, there's also decks, right? Saying what you're doing. But the biggest takeaway for me, and something I didn't have, which now I wish I did, was this social media presence and making yourself stand out as a brand, as a character. And to give another further example to that, we now see that in Hollywood, right? Where Hollywood production studios will hire a lesser known actor because they have such a huge social media presence over a well-known actor, because it's more likely they're going to get more eyeballs, right? It's about being seen and then potentially selling that extra ticket, right? So
Yeah.
Again, those basics of who are you as a person? How are you different? It's not just about the sticker on a go-kart, motocross bike, or on your race car. It's how are you reaching the consumer? And just like your own example is, what's that return on investment? So again, like, to all the parents listening to this, what Tony is saying in a rather nice way, which I won't say it in a nice way, is cut the bullshit, remove your ego, and tell your kid to put in the work.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So I'll let you continue. I went on a rant there because I know we're both passionate people, and like these tools that these drivers have today, and they still don't take advantage of it because they're just friggin' lazy, right? They want
kind of. I mean, you bring up some points too, and kind of help me. Again, trying to stay on point with talking about amateur racers and stuff like that. And sometimes I get kind of steered more onto the professional side of things. And at the very basic, some of these things are extremely basic, but they're being missed. And you're bringing up some really valid points as far as, a hero card that you could hand out. These are some basic things that I think, like, for me, it's just, that's everyday things,
common
that
sense.
I
It's
don't,
common
yeah.
sense.
Exactly. And or having a cool logo, or and really understanding the marketplace too, and how sponsors might look at these things. And I guess I use the example of a Amazon mentality, because Amazon, if you ever bought anything on the Amazon app, it's just, you can buy now and then it's done. You don't have to go on a website and enter your name and your address and your credit card information. If I find something that I see on an ad somewhere, I'll like see if it's available on Amazon instead of buying it direct from the website. So it's kind of that easy access to items. And so I use that same example with racing, is that when you see these other personalities, let's say with motocross, let's use Hayden Deegan and the Deegan family for an example, because Haley is racing. Brian has a large acumen as far as racing. His son Hayden is racing motocross. They're very, active on social media, very active on YouTube, and they are sending sponsorship stuff out, and they're getting it out to a lot of people. So now the industry becomes aware of, this is what's available, and then, it doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest dollar amount either, but these sponsors and these brands now become aware, and this is now the standard. It's very easy to get a lot of views, a lot of impressions, move some merchandise, move some product by having someone with ample social media to positively talk about it and endorse product or integrate it into their lifestyle. And I think that that's something, like, at the very basic, you try to understand that, and getting the youngsters to start to talk on social media, or showcase their brands that they're using, even if they're not sponsored by them. They can still tag it. We get sometimes our drivers into meetings with sponsors, and the sponsors will straight up ask them, can you give me an example of how you're promoting your current sponsors on social media? And usually it's just crickets. because they're not doing that on social media, and they're not even like pretending or even saying an example. Let's say that they have some Oakley sunglasses that they bought at the store, and they could take a picture of themselves and tag Oakley, or talk about how they like their Oakley. Maybe it's, they fit well, they look cool, I don't know. So an example like that, or if it's a driving, shoe or something like that they're already using, they could tag it. They could use that as an example. So sponsors might see and say, okay, well, they know what they're doing. We want to be in that too. Now we want that. Can you do that for us? And, I do think it is something to do with lazy. I don't know. I didn't grow up in the world of social media, but I don't understand how these youngsters, they don't, know what to do on social media. And we get that answer too. Well, we don't know what to do. Well, I see you're following all these other drivers, you don't see what they're doing, like maybe try to do some of those things. And we're probably a little bit more structured with it, behind the scenes, we might be a little, no bullshit, but on a podcast, I think I'm going to probably try to stay as professional as possible, but
Yeah, this is unfiltered. So by all means, just have at it. But one thing that you touched on before, and I want to provide some clarity to that, because I think it's really, really important. And you and I, we've spoken offline about it before, is you said there's a difference between the value of going racing, so the cost of racing, versus what value you're actually bringing to a sponsor. So when a parent or even a gentleman driver, right, is looking at how much it costs to go racing, 225,000. I mean, like, I think go-karting budgets now are well over 125,000. But that's the cost versus how much of a value I actually have. So you said it, but I want to provide clarity there to make sure people understand there's two different things. There's the cost to go racing, and then the value you're actually able to offer. So can you just explain that a little bit more clearly? Because I want to make sure it's clear to parents.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to answer too, because value is different for everybody. And some brands will look at, media impressions, or, and compare it to a cost per 30-second type ad, TV commercial ad type thing, or how much awareness, am I getting? Some brands are looking for new sales. And so this is a example of understanding your sponsor and really having those conversations with them very early on, and really understanding what their goals are and what they're trying to achieve. And then looking inside your toolbox, as far as your marketing toolbox, of what do I have available that I can help them achieve their goals through my racing. We did a sponsorship in NASCAR with a company called Dometic, which is like a $20 billion company. And, I don't think we're going to be able to drive new sales for them, or if we are, it's not going to show up on their P&L statements, for example. You know what I mean? And that wasn't their goal. Their goal was to engage with the local RV dealers and installers all around the racetracks and incorporate them. That was their goal. And so their goal wasn't to put their logo on the truck and then, drive new sales that way. Or more awareness. They already own the industry with that and category that they're in. It was more of an activation side. So we understood that very early on. And some brands, they might be more interested in sales, like my example with Gorilla Mill. Some brands that, they're already doing really good with their sales, and anything that, direct sales, let's say, that we would be able to provide isn't going to impact it, that much for a $20 billion, company. So then it's the activation side, and they'll still drive sales through that, but it's more, when a customer goes into the RV dealer and they're thinking about updating their air conditioners or their refrigerators, that those, service techs or those salespeople are going to drive that Dometic brand that way. And that was the way that they did that. So it's more really understanding at its very, early stages of the sponsorship dialogue of what is this company trying to achieve. And sometimes you have these conversations with them and they don't really know. They're almost looking for us, or they're going to look for you as a driver to explain to them what you can do for them. And they might, listen to some bullet point ideas, and they might be like, oh, okay, well, we have all that. We're doing all that stuff. It's like, so you got to kind of have a relationship. The relationship is going to be important. I think that that's something that maybe I didn't touch on earlier, but, anyone you talk to with sponsorships, yourself, Eric, all these people who are very experienced with, racing and sponsorships and marketing through motorsports, you got to have a good relationship. This is all about building relationships with your sponsors, and building that trust and really understanding how you can help them grow, and then coming up with customized or creative ideas that might be different that can help them achieve their goals. And so the value is going to be different for everybody, but it's okay. And I think it's very common to try to sell a sponsorship based on the cost that you would incur to compete. That's okay. But you got to have an understanding too of, realistically in the marketplace, what is the value of that sponsorship? Is the cost higher than the value? Is the value higher than the cost? Because you want to be, providing a 3 or 4 to 1 return on investment, as far as overall marketing and impressions or sales, or really, trying to make sure that they're not losing money on it and they're just giving you money to go and race so you can have fun, and then it's just a charity. You got to have a business model behind it. And that's really tough to do when you're young. So, I would suggest for people to try and subsidize their sponsorships and build relationships at entry level to start out small and then grow that as you build that relationship, as you build that trust, and, work with them as you go along with what's working, what's not working, and make tactical adjustments. And, so the value question, it's tough, to answer because it's variable.
Yeah, but you said it very well. You said it's understanding.
Yeah.
Right. You can't pitch a sponsorship or chase a sponsorship without a basic understanding of who are you pitching to, right? And that other factor is relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships for me are so important. I mean, it's what gets you in the door, or at least your pitch on the top of the pile. It's just always going to events that maybe you really don't need to go to. For myself, as example, another press event luncheon, right? But it's that FaceTime. So, Tony, in your opinion, how long does a sponsorship usually take to come to fruition?
Yeah, great question. We get that all the time. Someone will inquire and they say, how long is this going to take? When are we going to get a sponsor? It's going to take some time. Expect it to be many months. As you know, as other industry professionals knows, this can take some time. It can take, 18 months. It can take 24 months to fully fund a property. Should it take that long? No, not necessarily. It can be just a couple months, but it could be, expect a year turnaround, essentially. You got to be looking at a year out always. And we always are talking about constantly feeding the sales pipeline as far as sponsorship sales goes. And so what that means for an amateur is kind of being the Terminator, and you're just never stopping. Even if you have sponsors and you're fully funded, you're going to constantly be reaching out to new companies, trying to build new relationships, fill a sales pipeline, and fill it with leads, and constantly fill it with leads. Not every lead is going to go to a contract, but you got to constantly build new relationships, invite people to race tracks, keep them updated, and continue on the process. It will take some time. Expect it to take some time, especially if the driver is not going to be doing anything on social media, and if they're not going to be a top chasing that podium. Expect it to take some time. I know of professional IndyCar drivers who are doing deals, and it takes them 18 months to do their own deal, and these are big names. So when you hear about a big name, a famous name, that it takes them 18 months to do a sponsorship, and then for a parent or a teenager to expect it to be like 90 days, you're just not understanding the realistic expectations, as far as how the industry is going to operate and how these sponsorships are sold. The sponsorships are not sold, usually like a television commercial or like media buy. It's not the media buy industry. It's different. So it's a long and drawn out process for sure.
Okay, we could keep going on and on forever about this, but I really want to target some of those do's and don'ts. So I'll kick it off with like the do's is like understanding who you are as a brand and then brand's approach. Now, the don'ts for me is huge. Do not post things on social media like drinking and the partying. For me, that's a huge no-no. I don't do that. That's not for my brand. When somebody sends us an email saying sponsor me or do whatever, it's the first thing we do. It's like you said, it's like, well, who is this person? Do I actually like this character? So that for me is being very, very careful with social media. But I'll let you take it away. What are some of those do's and don'ts when it comes to motorsport sponsorship and marketing?
Yeah, great question. Some do's, think of sales, sponsorship sales as 2 or 3, sided. You gotta have numbers. You gotta reach out to a lot of companies. And you just got to kind of play the numbers game. As bad as that sounds and as gray as that industry, that area is, you got to have numbers. You got to reach out to more than just 5 people, for your sponsorship. Not everyone is going to be interested. You could have the best business case in the world, and that one person at the company is just not interested, So you got to play the numbers game. You got to have relationships. You got to understand, the business to business side of the industry as well. And how could I help this company, make money? All these businesses, they're going to be in business to make money. So that's their primary goal, is to make money, and maybe new awareness, will help them make money. Mass media will help them make money. More people are looking at their brands, more people are looking at their service. So understanding, the sales side of things, if you're sending emails out, if you're making phone calls, you kind of have to hustle. It is a grind. It's going to be a lot of hard work. It's a full-time job for sure. Some don'ts, like you had mentioned. Don't be, don't post some shady stuff on your social media. Understand that, these people are going to be looking at you. Keep it clean off of social media as well. Lifestyle, if you're wild, and you get in trouble, the industry is going to see that kind of stuff at somewhere it can pop up. I would say a big don't is don't not focus on your marketing side of things. We still see that to this day. Or they don't have a logo, or they have a logo and they think it's the best logo in the world, but it's just not a good logo. Let's just say it like that. Or they have a website and it's just not a good website, or it's like a DIY website. And you got to have this stuff perfected, especially if you're going to be asking for money. If you're going to be asking for 50,000 or more, you got to have this stuff organized. You got to think big. You got to think like, how am I going to help this company grow? So these are things that we see, and we get inquiries, and people are, they don't want to, pay someone to sell their sponsorships, and they just want it. And then you go and look at their brand, and the logo is crap, the website, or they don't even have a website. They don't have a marketing pitch deck. They're not doing anything on social media. So you got to be active. You gotta, I would say another don't, and this is just maybe strange for me, don't not be in the race car. You got to be racing. You can't just sit on the couch and expect sponsorships. And I know that's tough because there are some people in that position, but you got to find a way to be in the car. It doesn't matter what car, where it is, if it's big time or small time, you got to be advancing your skill set. You got to be, staying in the race car as much as possible. That's the big thing for me. When the drivers are not in the car, it's really, really tough to sell sponsorships for them. Some other don'ts, I would say, and this is a tough one, this might be controversial. Don't make your parents do everything for you in this industry. We deal with a lot of parents, and it's very difficult. And the sponsors, frankly, they don't want to deal with your parents. Every parent thinks their kid is the best. And like, I think the same thing about my kid, but if he's going to go and try to do something, I kind of make him do that. And if he's going to try and fail, he's going to learn from that failure, and he's going to get better the next time. We have kids that are 19, 20, and their mom and dad still are the ones that we have to deal with. Or when we set up meetings for them, their mom and dads do the meetings. And then, we tell them you can't, the kid is going to be the representative of the spot, this company. They're the face, they're the driver, not the parents. So that's something that just drives me up the wall, is too much parent involvement. For sure, the parents should be involved, but they probably maybe need to take a back seat, and make sure that their kids are still doing their schoolwork, that they're not being inappropriate, and they're doing all these things. But if you're going to hire professionals, let the professionals do it. You got to understand too, when you're dealing with sponsors, that the sponsors are going to be expecting your child to be, a public speaker, a promoter, a social media marketing expert, whether they are or they're not. The parents are not going to be able to do it. And sometimes the parents are the problems. And that's the biggest thing. The other thing is, don't go after, when you're an amateur up and coming driver, understand the difference between a champion brand and a challenger brand. And those are two different categories of businesses. Like a champion brand would be Red Bull, Nike, Under Armour. A challenger brand would be a smaller brand that's maybe trying to compete with those. This just happened recently, a parent for a teenage driver that they would send me a list of sponsors they want us to reach out to. And it's like Nike, Under Armour, Red Bull, Rockstar, Monster. And it's like, these are all champion brands. They get 1,000 solicitations a day with, race car sponsorships. You got to have an understanding of where you stand in the marketplace. Don't go after the big brands. Don't have your agency go after the big brands. The agencies, they should know better. Their reputation is on the line as well. Like, we know better not to go there. And then so it's our job to kind of manage that with the parent and try to teach them that they're not going to consider it. And then it makes us look bad, because we should know better and take them opportunities that are going to actually help them and going to fit with their brand or their strategies. We should know that at the agency level. Parents, they don't know that. So that's a big thing too, really understanding the marketplace. Don't go after the big brands if you're an amateur or if you're just starting out. Go after the challenger brands, go after local brands. Businesses love local heroes, local race car drivers. Go after the local brands.
Yes, well said.
Another do is get comfortable speaking. If you're not comfortable on the phone, if you're not comfortable doing interviews with sponsors on the phone even, that's going to be difficult for you, because the sponsors, they're going to be adults. They're probably educated. They're going to be looking for you to kind of perform. Even in the smallest ways is communication. Communication is key in this industry. You got to be able to communicate. If there's something bad that's happened, you got to be able and upfront about it, and so you can correct it and move on. A lot of people just brush it under the rug and they just hope the sponsor doesn't find out or something. Or you got to communicate. You got to be clear communicators. I guess that's some of the things that stick out for me off the top of my head. I'm sure that there are others, but
all very, very well said. So Tony, I always appreciate our conversations. If my viewers on YouTube want to connect with you, or people listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, how do they connect with you?
LinkedIn, I would say the best, or just through our website, drivemotorsportsinternational.com. Call into the office line, talk to the receptionist, let them know who you are and what series you're racing in, and we will absolutely get back to you same day or very next day.
Okay, excellent. Tony, thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you trackside.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Hi guys, I'm Juliana, your automotive woman. Thank you for listening or watching to this week's episode of Cars Without Sausage. If you enjoy unfiltered automotive and motorsport content, consider subscribing. Cars Without Sausage, no egos, no dickheads, just a passion for cars.